One of my missions in life is to introduce interesting people to interesting people. And so with this, I'd like to introduce you to Jordan Wilson from Everyday AI, who's going to share expert chats, trained chat GPT to be employees with PPP methods.
All right. Thank you, Gerald. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for everyone joining. Very excited to stick around and hear everyone else present as well. But let's get to it. Let's talk expert chats. All right. So, and how you can create expert chats with ChatGPT using our PPP method. All right. So if you're looking at these words on screen and you're saying, I've never heard of these, let me Google them, you're not going to find anything. These are our methods that we've created at Everyday AI, and we're sharing them all with you today. I think this is actually the first time I've ever talked about expert chats at length, even though I do have a daily AI podcast. So prompts, right? Like, I think when we think ChatGPT, everyone thinks of prompts. If I'm being honest, if you're just prompting in ChatGPT, you are missing the actual power of using a large language model. And that's what today's all about. So quickly about me, I've been an employee and I'm also now an employer. So real quick, I was a journalist for 7 years, wrote a bunch of articles all over the place, won ACP Story of the Year, Pulitzer Fellow as well. Then I spent about 10 years in marketing and advertising with a nonprofit, and we essentially became an activation agency for Jordan Brand and Nike. So more on that later. That's actually me talking to a bunch of NBA superstars now. But where I'm at right now is I'm an agency owner. I have a small business. I have employees. I have to train them. And that's really what we're going to be talking about. But one thing I wanted to call out there, and I highlighted it in blue, is our team has been using GPT since 2020, right? A lot of people think GPT has only been out since November 2022 with ChatGPT, but it's actually been out for a long time. And I saw a lot of people just misusing it. And that actually led me to start Everyday AI. Gerald, thank you for the shout out this morning. But yeah, we do this every single weekday morning, 7:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. So join us on LinkedIn. We have a live stream. We bring on expert guests. We put it out on podcasts at about 8:15 a.m. Central Standard. And then we have a daily newsletter that goes out as well at about 11 a.m. Central Standard. So we're teaching about just about everything in generative AI, but that's not what you're here for. You're here to learn about how we can do these expert chats. And there's going to be something at the bottom that you see. It says get access. And you're probably asking, what is that? Or what is this PPP? So this is actually a testimonial I got just yesterday from Adrian. He's actually a software engineer who works at a generative AI company. And he said he took the PPP class this week. And he said right there, I feel like I'm actually using AI for the first time. Absolutely brilliant class. So when you do, Gerald's going to send out the slides. Make sure you click that at the bottom to get free access to our PPP course. All right, so let's talk about it. What are these expert chats? What is the PPP method? Prime Prompt Polish. It's, like I said, it's our method for getting the most out of ChatGPT and other AI chats. So there's really three very important considerations before I even dive into the PPP method and expert chats. The biggest one is we have to break habits. I think with a lot of us using ChatGPT, we've really gotten into this habit because we see these prompts all over the internet, like this example I have on screen, where they say, hey, copy and paste this prompt and put it into ChatGPT, and it's going to change your business. It's going to save you so much time. Is that true? Kind of, but that's also not how you should be using a large language model. So before we even get started, it's first important to break that habit. Putting in one relatively short input is not getting out what you would want, right? So we think of how we've used Google, right? Where you put in a short input and you look for one output, which has relatively worked. So it's a combination of those two things. People saying, hey, insert this one thing, and then how we've been trained to use search engines for 2 decades plus, getting one output. So you have to really shift your mindset, right? You cannot just take that really long output that you copy and pasted from a prompt website and get or expect a great output. It's okay, right? But wouldn't it be better to instead treat ChatGPT like an employee, right? And that's what we're going to be going over. And more on that, that thing's labeled, there's some abbreviations, don't worry. But the biggest thing of getting the most out of ChatGPT or any large language model is really having that mindset shift and knowing that each of those little chats that you're saving inside ChatGPT, those are employees that need to be trained. So how do we do that, right? So without getting too deep into the technical aspect of what a large language model is, it's essentially there's 1.8 trillion parameters in GPT-4, the paid version of ChatGPT. So we have to think of interacting with ChatGPT the same way that we would think of interacting with a brand new employee. So if you were to get a new employee and you wanted to get the most out of that employee, you would onboard them, train them, reinforcement learning, feedback, testing, knowledge sharing, all of those things, right? And we have to do the same thing with expert chats, right? So if a new employee walked in to your company and you were expected to train them up and have them performing at a very high level, you wouldn't just throw down a company handbook and say, all right, now go do this immediately. Of course not. There's a conversation. There is learning that needs to take place. There's back and forth, all right? And that leads us to these expert chats, all right? So all of these expert chats here on the left, right? And don't worry, we're gonna have more on this at the end if you don't pick it all up now. But these are all expert chats that you are going to train up through our PPP method, our prime prompt polish. Think of it as this. You have with ChatGPT an unlimited number of expert employees at your disposal who you should be training for one very specific purpose, okay? So when we're talking about this and going through the PPP method, keep that in mind, that you should be training many chats and keeping them separate. You should also be creating some sort of labeling system, right? So within each ChatGPT chat, whether you're using plugins, which I highly recommend, I never use anything else, or the default model or code interpreter, right? Because when you are going to refer back to your trained employees in the future, you have to know, who is this person? What did I train them? All right. And then you also need to keep memory or tokens in mind. That's the other thing. The same way that a human employee would start to forget things over time, you need to constantly jog ChatGPT's memory because of there's tokens, right? And you start to lose those things. And I know what some of you are saying, well, oh, okay, well, you can use, Anthropic's Cloud 2, which has a way bigger memory. You can, but in my opinion, and in my experience of using the GPT technology for years and spending hundreds of hours a month inside ChatGPT, it is far superior to any other large language model out there. So let's get into it. Prime prompt polish. All right, let's talk about priming. That is where we give ChatGPT background. We go through a Q&A process and we do a memory recall. All right, prompt. So that is where we take the determinations, emphasis on that word, and we give then ChatGPT its role, task, format, and expected output, right? And we don't stop there. Then we polish. We navigate, we steer, we finish, and again, we do a memory recall. All right, this is going to be a lot because I want to get through the 15 minutes. But as a reminder, this is a very little preview of the full course that we offer for free. So make sure, I'm going to be dropping the link in the chat after this. So just make sure you go sign up for that. So why should you use PPP? Well, as an example here, here's one of these super prompts that you can find on the internet and copy and paste it. It is specific. It's telling ChatGPT of the audience, and we're giving it a desired output. Yet, as you'll find out if you've played with ChatGPT before, the responses can be redundant, hallucinations, and it can be generic. In this little example, I told ChatGPT to, write landing page copy for everyday AI. But like I talked about, when you're training an employee, you have to make sure that ChatGPT, your new employee, has access to all of that information. So in this case, ChatGPT has no clue what everyday AI is. I have to make sure I have plugins enabled to give ChatGPT the access that it needs, to give it the knowledge and the reinforcement learning that it needs. All right, so let's start with the first one, priming. Y'all, I wish I could spend like 2 hours on priming and how important it is, because everyone always skips over this step. And people just immediately find the longest prompt that they can find on the internet and hope that it works. Priming is extremely important. So like we talked about, this is where we do background and Q&A. I can't even show you in this one example that I did for this presentation the amount of priming, because it would take probably about 20 to 25 screenshots. So priming, again, keep in mind, there's 1.8 trillion parameters inside GPT-4. So you have to really go back and forth and ask ChatGPT questions, right? So in this example, the prime, I say, before we get started and I give you a prompt for landing page copy, what other information do you need, or what questions do you have? And as you can imagine, there's a lot of back and forth. I can't even show you everything in here. But that is the very basics of priming. So let's move on to prompt. This is where we take the determinations. And this is where, again, I want to emphasize how important priming is, because there was a series of questions, and I've done this a lot, but usually ChatGPT will have anywhere from 12 to 30 questions if you are really training it to be an expert in one area. So think of how much better in the end your prompt will be after going through priming. We have all of those now determinations to the questions that ChatGPT asks. Like an example is, in my example, it said, what visual elements will there be on the page for your landing page? Because it wants to write content around that. Something that you probably might not have thought of if you just started prompting. So again, prompting actually in the PPP method is probably the fastest, but all we're going to do is remind of the role, and then we're going to remind of the audience, the pain points, the angle, tone, and copy requirements. And then last but not least, we polish. This is where we navigate, steer, and finish training our employee, right, to know exactly what we are going to want in the future, and then we do a memory recall. Here's why. And you're probably thinking like, all right, Jordan, why would you go through that whole process just for landing page copy for everyday AI? Well, now at this point, I told you, I've been getting paid to write for 20 years. Now I have an employee in ChatGPT that can write landing page copy at such a high level and exactly how I want it. All right, so now we have an expert chat. We've gone through that whole process. And you'll see there, I kind of have it labeled. It might be a little blurry, but in that case, I say it's everyday AI, LPC landing page copy. And I have 3 plugins enabled because I need to give it information. So in this instance, I have a web browsing plugin, a PDF plugin, and a YouTube plugin. So more on that, we teach that more in the class, but you can't go back and forth and add and delete things. All right, so a little trick. I told you that, when I was at a nonprofit, I worked a lot with Nike and Jordan Brand. And one thing the global head of marketing kind of taught me at Jordan Brand is for their social media, he said every single social media channel has a different voice, a different output, right? So you have to think of the same thing with your expert chats. You need to create as many as possible and train as many as possible to do different things, whether it's to research, automate, analyze, right? And so how do you use expert chats, right? So you've gone through the PPP process. You've primed, you've prompted, you've polished, and now you've assigned one very specific role for that chat. So again, when you go into ChatGPT, you don't start a new chat. You don't go edit your previous responses and rerun. You save, which is what we teach in the course. You save those chats and you go back to it. So if I need everyday AI landing page copy, I go back to that chat, and there's great kind of advanced tips that you can do, such as sharing it with your coworkers or copying a link, which is what we do, and putting it in a spreadsheet for easy access. So that's the fastest version of expert chats in PPP that I can possibly give. But when you get this, you can make sure to click it or go to youreverydayai.com/August and sign up for the free course. Again, hundreds of people have been through our course. We've helped tens of thousands of people learn generative AI through our podcast, live stream, and newsletter. So thank you very much. I appreciate you all tuning in, and I can't wait to see what everyone else has in store. So Gerald, back to you.